Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Okay, I know it's a little late, y'all. Good afternoon. I'm Karen Waters, as Deborah said, and I'm not going to do with a whole lot of formalities. Just want to give you a little overview of what we're going to do today. We will have each of our distinguished panelists speak for 5 minutes, and then we're going to open it up for a discussion. Feel free to include any questions of our earlier panelists. If any of you came over from the rotunda, you will remember some of those folks as well. So far this morning, we have looked at the problem of punishment from a historical perspective. We've also heard about the contemporary situation and some very alarming statistics from Mr. Heblich just as we left. For those of you who are not at the rotunda, really alarming numbers about how many people are prosecuted here. So it is my great honor as a graduate of this institution and of the Woodson and a community member to be a bridge between the academy and the community and to bring it all home, so to speak. I have some wonderful folks next to me. I'm going to name them right to left just so that you can match them up because we don't have great pictures, and then we're going to go ahead forward. But to my right is Jim Shea with the Virginia Organizing Project. Next to him is Eddie Harris with Children, Youth and Family Services Real Dads program. Next to him is Eddie Howard, my colleague on the Restorative Community Foundation Board. Next to him is Helen Trainor from the Legal Aid Justice Center. Legal Aid is another great partner in crime. We have Herb Dickerson from the Aid Services Group, Lisa Nelson from Offender Aid and Restoration, Harold Folley from the Virginia Organizing Project, and last but not least, next to Harold, lean back. Okay, we have from Books Without Bars and the Quest Bookstore. I'm struggling with the name though. Kay, the beautiful Kay. I have heard so much about Kay, and it's my pleasure to meet Kay. We're going to go ahead and get started. Let's start with Kay on that side. And just give us 5 minutes of your reflection on Virginia and punishment and the work that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Deborah, for putting this together. It's been fabulous. I have the Books Behind Bars that I've been doing for 20-some years. And I guess we all know that when a person goes to prison, they lose just about everything. But what they do have is time, and they have their mind. And so they can think, and that's where we come in. We send books. I know we put over 1 million books into the prisons in Virginia, and we're now reaching out to other states. You know, I went by the office at lunchtime. This is a light mailing. These are all inmate letters. We usually get about 25 or more a day. We get 500 every month. And I'm not here by myself. I see one volunteer back there. We have university students who come every Tuesday and Friday to read letters, sort books, and pack them up. I sent out 22 big boxes yesterday, UPS, to 21 different prisons in Virginia. I work very closely with the Department of Corrections. I'm an approved vendor for them. I work with counselors, librarians, and thousands of inmates. It's amazing the letters that we get and what they ask for. They seem to have the idea that we are a huge bookstore with unlimited books and titles. But we are not, but we do depend on the donations of many people. Books come from every place. They come from churches, they come from individuals who hear about us. It's pretty amazing where they hear about us. Well, since I also have the bookstore, I have a jar sitting in the bookstore. This is for prisoners, help pay the postage for prisoners. So that's a good advertisement, and that jar gets filled up. You'd be surprised. I'm always surprised. What else would you like to know? I'm so excited at the way this has grown. I should say that the money comes from grants many organizations have given thousands of dollars, and individuals. We couldn't do this without. I guess our rate for a month is about $4,000 for the rent and postage. It went from sending one book to an inmate 20 years ago to now sending out, 500 letters a month, and we send about 5 books to each inmate. So you can figure out that's a lot of books. And I do want to say this, what they want most is a dictionary. Practically every letter comes, please send me a dictionary. Yeah, it's amazing. And people say, well, what would they do with a dictionary? They're trying to learn. They're really struggling to better themselves. They want almanacs, they want textbooks, self-help books, books on relationships, practically anything, gardening, crocheting, and we often have just the right book that they ask for. I think I'll stop then, and that's about 5 minutes.
That's about 5 minutes. Thank you, Kay. Next, we have Harold Folley from Virginia Organizing Project.
Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody for coming. My story, my little story started, I was maybe 19, 18, I got incarcerated, and I did a stint in federal prison. And it was because of the crack law, the 5-year, 5 gram law. So that happened like 89, 90. So I did my time, I got out, and, the big difference from me, I did federal time. A lot of my friends was doing state time. And so, I heard stories about state prisons, and I was like, oh, man, I'm in trouble. But it was a big difference in the feds. The feds is like real big. They got big guns. They got big walls. I always tell the story about how reality hit me when I went to, I was in transit. They call it transit in the federal prison, where they take you to one place to another place till you get to your destination. Once I got to Atlanta prison, and the bus brought us in, and then the sun disappeared because the tall 50-foot, 80-foot wall, and the guy bringing the guns up from the bus really brought my attention to why and where I was at. But the prison life actually helped me become who I am now. And, it's crazy to say, but it did. Right now I am working as an organizer for a wonderful organization, the Virginia Organizing Project. And a couple things that we do, we try to, what we do is we organize people who don't have a voice to become vocal in their government. And a lot of things I do now are something that's passionate for me. One thing that we're doing now are helping ex-felons do the application process to get their rights back. In Virginia, if you know, Virginia is one of the hardest states against ex-felons in any matter. And I sat in a meeting with a delegate maybe last December, and I explained to him, I myself is an ex-felon, and I myself is looking to get my rights back. And he looked at me and said, well, I don't feel any sympathy for felons. And this delegate is actually the one who's making policies for Virginia. So, and a lot of people don't feel like people deserve a second chance, but I'm here to say, and a lot of people on this panel will say, people deserve a second chance. One thing I'm putting my organizing hat on there. I am here today to also push that you all can do something. If you live in Virginia, you can call the governor and ask him to sign an executive order to allow ex-felons to get their rights back without doing an application process. And the number is 1-804.
Give them a minute. Let them write it down, Harold.
Okay. You ready? 1-804-786-2211. If you don't think you want to call them, you can email the governor at virginia.gov and hit contact governor and write to him and tell him that you see that it's a need that ex-felons should be able to vote. And if you don't want to do that, you can also write a letter to the editor. It's all many ways that we can push for this. But I don't talk long. I'm a person who loves to take action. So I'm going to turn it over to the next person. Thank you.
Next we have Lisa Nelson.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Karen, for having me, and thanks, Herb, for suggesting me to this panel. I consider it an honor to be here. I work at OAR, Offender Aid and Restoration, as a reentry specialist, and I do consider it a blessing to work in that field as someone who is an ex-offender, been in prison, in and out of jail for a number of years, and have faced and overcome many challenges. It is truly a blessing that I work in the field that I do. When I was offered the job, I'm like, oh God, you're moving too fast for me. This is just awesome for me, because I truly have a passion to help the ex-offenders, because I know that there is hope for everyone. If there's hope for me and I can overcome the challenges that I've faced, I know there's hope. And the job that I do is assist with ex-offenders in transitioning back into the community. If they've been incarcerated for some time and they're released, lots of times they're without identification, they're in need of clothes, food, and all of that. I do assist with that. I also make referrals to other agencies. The class that I also facilitate a class at the jail as part of my the reentry program, which is a blessing as well, because when I was in jail, there was a lack of programs, and I had to be released into a program in which I got a lot of help from. So I know that the programs do work. That program is run by lots of volunteers who come in, volunteer their time to facilitate classes. So, excuse me. So I do know that they work. I've seen lots of women being excited about finally there's something being offered for me. They're stepping out, and so I think this is awesome, especially when I look back and I know that they weren't there available for me at that time inside the prison system. But fortunately, luckily, they are more and more becoming available, because I think people are seeing that there's a need for that and that they do work. Well, I think that's it for now.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Mr. Dickerson.
Thank you. My name is Herbert Dickerson. I work for the AIDS Services Group. And before I got here, when Karen asked me to do the speaking, I started going through my mind all the things I really wanted to say. And when Miss Davis walked in the room, all of this went out the door. I mean, and I don't know, I'm old enough, I ain't gonna tell my age, but I'm old enough to remember her beginning. That's right. Which really jump-started my beginning. That's right. And she went one way and I went the wrong way. But I'm just in awe to be in her presence. Amen. I'm in awe to be in her presence. And her struggles, because her struggle is my struggle. I am a full-time ex-offender, both at the federal and state level, dating back to 1976. I think I was 20 years old when I got my first federal charge. I thought I wanted to be this drug dealer. That's what I thought years ago. when in reality, after doing some work, excuse me, this phone will never stop ringing. I do a lot of outreach in the community for ex-offenders and substance abusers, and sometimes it's all day, every day, sometimes it's all night, every night. I mean, I was up to like 4 this morning with some guys. It's a never-ending job, but it's a challenging job. I feel personally that I have a master's degree in substance abuse. I mean, I was a substance abuser for 40 years, so it ain't a whole lot of people on this campus right here can tell me about substance abuse. Unless you've been there and you can feel it. Because there's a lot of feelings that come with substance abuse. There's a lot more to it than just drinking drugs. It's things that we medicate to not deal with. People say escape from reality. What happens, the reality is still the same. We just create more problems. And that's what I did. Today, thanks to a program I went to in my last incarceration with Therapeutic Community, and this lady sitting right here in the middle, Miss Renee Vance, pointed out to me what part I played and how my life turned out. You know, I could always blame a whole lot of people for situations I put myself in, but in reality, I made the choice. And I didn't have to. I wasn't stupid. I was a pretty good student in school, but my lifestyle, once looking back through the 12-step program, looking back at my life changed from segregation to integration. It pissed me off. I didn't like it, and I still have a problem with it, just today. But that's just my life. The things I did don't excuse the decisions I made. So today, I feel that I can reach people in the street, in the jails and penitentiaries that some people have a major fear or don't speak the language. I just don't want to deal with, because we basically second-class citizens. And like Harold said, I'm trying to get my rights back too. I got pissed yesterday because this government wanted $168 of my tax money, you know, but I can't even vote. Somehow that just don't add up to me. But I go ahead and gave it because I know what the consequences. I fought that thing all day yesterday. And I waited about 11:30 last night and just dropped it in the mail. But I don't feel it's right. But I don't make the law. Hopefully by this discussion we have, we can change some of these laws. You know, you ain't never got to get my voting rights back. It's being done. God is in charge. That's why you see the president we got. So you ain't got to get my voting right, but stop taking my money then. You know, if I'm a second-class citizen, let me pay second-class taxes. But that's the way I think. That ain't everybody's reality. That's the way I'm sure a lot of y'all pay taxes. That's just being an ex-offender. That's the way I feel about it. I don't know if we're going to change this time soon. We'll see. Depending on how many people call right here. That's right. But anyway, what I do, I work for the AIDS Services Group. And we work with men who have sex with men. We work with women who have sex with women. We work with the down low brother. We work with the people that don't really want to come out the closet. And while they're not coming out or not discussing it and don't have people they can confide in, they're steadily spreading this disease. In the penitentiaries, by far. You know, we're here to defend the criminal, inmate, or convict, because there's a difference between a convict and an inmate. It's a difference. When these people are doing some of the, man, I don't know what the word for it is, but some of the acts these men are doing behind bars and women, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. But my job is to hopefully, and with a lot of prayer and time and effort, hopefully change somebody's life from the substance abuse life or the choosing to get locked up, because that's basically a choice. I don't know a whole lot of people that's locked up because they had to sell drugs. I don't know a whole lot of them. I told myself it did, but really, in reality, that wasn't true. I was raised by a fine family. That was the choice I made and the consequences I suffered. I choose not to do that today. My whole being is to help change human life.
On that note, we're going to thank you, Herb.
Yes, you did.
5 minutes. We got a big panel. Next up, we have Counselor Helen Trainor from the Legal Aid Justice Center.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about how things really are in Virginia prisons. Among other things, I'm sure you're aware, Virginia prisons does not screen for HIV, AIDS, Hep C, or a whole variety of contagious diseases, either coming in or going out. And so it's probably no surprise to you that HIV/AIDS is the #1 killer of African American women in Virginia. All of this is news to me. I have been, for the last year and a half, the only person in Virginia who is tasked with looking at the conditions inside Virginia's prisons and jails. There are about 100 prison litigators around the country, and so even though I'm alone with the help of a couple of extraordinary volunteers, I am in daily contact with 100 or so lawyers who are actively, through class action litigation, forcing departments of corrections to create conditions of incarcerations that are minimally consistent with human rights. Virginia is a punitive state. A little known fact about Virginia is that its former director of corrections, whose name is Angelone, actually had a promotion after he finished creating the 2 supermax prisons on Virginia's border, those being Wallens Ridge and Red Onion. So he did so well here in Virginia that his next posting was to start Abu Ghraib. So that is the legacy that we have here in Virginia, and Abu Ghraib is not a far cry from the conditions that we are seeing in Virginia prisons, not just the supermax prisons, but throughout. It is a disgrace. Virginia is one of the most punitive states in the country. And at the risk of repeating, I will not, since I only have 5 minutes, repeat some of the statistics that you heard from previous panels. It is abundantly clear that blacks are punished not only for longer times, but because of the way the Virginia Department of Corrections classifies people. If you have committed a series of crimes, so-called violent crimes, and mind you, a violent crime can be interceding on behalf of your sister because her boyfriend is beating her up, right? So that's a violent crime, right? So let's say you have 2 or 3 of those, you fall into the minimum mandatory sentences, which sends you away from 10 to 20 years. Now, the way the Department of Corrections looks at this is they know nothing about what the circumstances of your crime. They have a grid, and they determine your classification level based on your number of years that you were sentenced to. So it's an assumption that the Department of Corrections makes that if you're sentenced to 20 years, you must be a really, really bad person. And so off you go to fill up Virginia's supermax prisons. Now, what is life like in those supermax prisons? First of all, Virginia, one of the aspects of Virginia that's particularly endearing to me is it is among the top of the states in the country to contract out most of its prison services to private companies whose stock payers make money and can only make money if prisoners are not being treated fairly. So if you are one of the unfortunate many black people to end up in the periphery of Virginia, which is, I should also say, it's not just the supermax prisons. Virginia has located its prisons on the periphery for a very good reason. Those are poor former tobacco areas, right? They are overwhelmingly white, and the prisons are filled overwhelmingly with urban black men, right? Yep. So I thought I would read you an affidavit that I received from a prisoner at Wallens Ridge Prison about the conditions in a rural prison. Again, mind you, just so you know, Virginia's prisons are almost all rural, right? I am a Virginia prisoner presently confined at Red Onion State Prison. The information contained in this affidavit is based on my personal knowledge. I am 47 years old, white male, born in Harlan, Kentucky, but I grew up in Big Stone Gap, Virginia, which is Wise County. Before being incarcerated, I have lived and traveled throughout southwestern Virginia. Red Onion State Prison and Wallens Ridge State Prison are both located in Wise County. I have been incarcerated at ROSP and WRSP since 1999, and I know many of the staff at these prisons from Free Society. I attended school with several of them. I do not like black people and make no secret of this fact. I have a long documented history in prison of racial conflicts with black prisoners. My attitude towards blacks is based on how I was raised in this area, where anti-black racism is just part of the culture, and how everyone is generally raised, both in my generation and the younger generation. Most of the guards and nurses and other whites who work at ROSP feel the same way I do towards blacks. Some are out in the open about it, like me, but most conceal it when around blacks or others whom they feel will not comfortably accept this attitude. Most staff, young and old, openly express their dislike of blacks and commonly refer to blacks as niggers and other racist names. This is because they feel comfortable around me and have shared the same racial identity. I won't go into it any further except to say, in many ways, staff, especially guards, appeal to white prisoners to adopt the racial views and not associate with blacks as friends. They also manipulate situations of violence between black prisoners, Latino prisoners, and whites and blacks they dislike for reasons other than race. If a prisoner throws feces on staff, he will be punished in various ways, including putting in chains for up to 48 hours. But if feces is thrown on a prisoner, none of this is done. Theirs is a long, undeniable, documented history of this at Red Onion State Prison. So we have descended to the level of white guards throwing feces at black prisoners in our supermax prisons. And lest you have any illusions about the conditions of these prisons, every single prisoner is locked 23 hours a day in a concrete box with only a little slit drawer. So the way, for example, chaplains administer communion is to slide the wafer through the slit in the drawer, right? So they go out, they only have 1 hour out a day in a sort of larger cage. And it's in that cage that the feces are thrown on them. So that's what's going on here in Virginia. Now, since I only need to conclude, there is a story about the other side, is sort of reverse racism. There's a women's prison not far from here in which the majority of the correctional officers are black, and the population at Fluvanna mirrors the statewide, which is about 65% black. The white women in there tell me that the black guards favor or are more lenient with the black women there. And that may be something having to do with the dynamics between the largely male black guards and their female black women, older women, perhaps some deference they have towards older women, perhaps their mothers. I don't know the answer to that. But the picture is not entirely clear-cut. It's complex. I don't even begin to understand it. But I do know one thing. As long as I live and breathe, and as long as I'm supported by this community, we will sue them.
All right. We like litigation sometimes. Eddie Howard.
Yes. Have you ever heard a grown man cry, "I can't take no more, let me die"? Have you ever heard a wounded animal say, "Shoot me again, I don't want to stay"? Have you ever seen an addict's dream when they sweat and shake and deaf as their scream? Then tell me why you know better than me when inside my heart you can't see. You think it all happens in my mind when you still can't explain it after all this time. I stand still convicted because you haven't let me go. Why? Because if you can't predict mine, you have nothing else to show. Don't hold me bound by the tradition of man. Today I know me, and here I stand. Stand I will with these few words, hoping someday my struggle will be heard. This struggle is no longer for me, but for all who follow, hoping to be free. Free from a society that won't let go because they pulled my record. Now they thinking me, they know. By the way, that's an insert from some of the manuscripts on the book I'm writing. And I read that first because now I want to tell you that 3 stints in the penitentiary and 40 charges later, I sit right here. And what I realize is the 40 charges later just struck all and everybody. And that's kind of how society sees us, even with 1 charge. See, we talk about being marginalized, and we get marginalized about the convictions and the things that allow society to see us different. But as a black male, I'm marginalized 2 different ways. First, I'm a black male. Second, I have a felon on my record. So I'm already seen, I have a dual process going against me. You know, kind of like the dual diagnosis they coming up with now about the different reasons people get high and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Well, that's what's against me now. You know, all the times that I was locked up, I could never figure out how to stay out of jail. Now, I could figure out how to get out. Because you know I had to get out to get all them charges, right? But I couldn't figure out how to stay out. And one day it hit me, use the same tools when you get out as you're using while you're in here. See, the system say felons can't hang with felons, but this is what I found out. When I hang with somebody I trust, I'm going to allow him, Eddie and Herb and Harold, and all the rest of the people that I met on my journey to tell me things that I wouldn't let the system tell me. And I was going to listen to them. And I came to find out those that traveled that journey the same way I traveled that journey was going to be more beneficial for me than any 12-step program. You know, keep coming back. You work if you work it. It worked. I was a drug addict, so I kept going back. So I know it worked if you work it. You see what I'm saying? But I come to find out that, you know, there's a true saying in the rooms when they say you can only keep what you have by giving it away. And I knew I had something to give, and that was my life. And you know, when I came home, when 96, I was looking at a life and 40-year sentence. But all glory to God, I was home in 99, 3 years later. And I began to meet the same guys, and I hope they don't mind me saying this, that I hung out with on the street, getting high and doing everything else we was big and bad enough to do. But we came together on a positive level, and we encouraged each other, and we met at coffee houses, and we would stop on the street corners, and we would spend that time together, and we would talk about our struggles, and we could be real with one another, and we didn't have to go underground. See, the system has set up a system for us as ex-felons that we have to go underground. We got to lie about our address. I give you this address, but I really live over here because you done already said I can't go over there and live, when what you don't realize is that's the only place I got to go unless you want me to be homeless. So I found out that I had to use the same guys and the same friends to help keep me on that positive note while I help keep them on that positive note. See, the aftermath of prison, the only difference is you're not locked up, and the guard not blowing the whistle, and they not serving you the tray 3 times, but you're still under the same system. Your guidelines don't change. And once that thing snapped in my head to use the system to benefit me, I knew the next thing I had to do was use what I know to help benefit others, and that way I could stay on this journey. You know, For about 13 months now, I've been on this, I would say, a sabbatical from it all because I just got burnt out, washed out, and just couldn't think straight. And in that time, I was just working on this book. But, you know, it was a privilege, and it is a privilege to be able to walk beside guys and help motivate guys to move forward. And the strongest thing that I found out was when we would point these men to their children. And point the children back to their men. Because what we want when we get out is to be trusted. We got all these great hopes. We got all these great dreams. And we get out and we find out that system don't trust us. That's right. And that system kill our hopes and slay our dreams. And what do? We get frustrated. We get angry, Herb, all over again. I'll pay your taxes if you pay mine. Just as a sidebar note, we can talk about it after this. And I can't vote. And I've been at this for about 12 years now. And I've got so frustrated with the paperwork. How many, 3-4 times? Harold, we tried it about 3 years ago, didn't we?
Yep.
We still struggle to be a part of the system that say we have made it.
Come on.
And I'll close with that.
All right. And we'll just remind everybody to call that number and send that email before we go on to Eddie. Eddie Harris.
Okay, my name is Eddie Harris. I work with Children's Youth and Family Services Real Dads program. And the REAL stands for Responsible, Empowering, Available, and Loving Men in the Lives of their children. And basically the reason why I have such a passion for that is because I haven't been that great a dad myself. So, you know, I really felt like it was something that I needed to be a part of. And I knew it was a lot of men just like me that had been absent, you know, and a lot of it wasn't by choice. You know, it was by bad decisions and continuously making bad decisions, you know, and I mean, you know, I was over in that same program that Herb spoke about, the TC program, and it did a whole lot, you know, and it helped me to build a whole lot of a foundation that I can work from today. And that's part of what I attempt to do in the lives of these men is, you know, if I really want to see the change, and I think if they really need to see the change, it has to come from a love of self, you know, not just a bunch of information.
That's right.
You know, they have to do a real in-depth self-evaluation and get a real, true, genuine love for self to make the type of changes that, you know, I think everybody would love to see, you know. Because without that, I'm going to give up. Without that, I'm going to let my anger overcome me. That's the only thing that really keeps me going is that, you know, I'm developing, and I'm still developing a love for myself, you know. Probably one of the most hurtful experiences that I had was I was going to court, coming back from court, happy as a mug. They said I had the opportunity to go to work release. I was happy, and who I passed in the hallway but my son, Shacklin. You know what I'm saying? So that, you know, it still has an effect on me. You know, so, I mean, I wasn't that great of a father. The example that I showed my son is the example that he followed. You know, fathers need their children, and children need their fathers, you know. And my son is like, hopefully on the last 18 months of a 10-year sentence, you know. And I done did every day with him, you know. So it's got to stop somewhere. And I'm just thankful to be a part of what I consider to be the solution. Because families are made up of fathers, wives, and children, you know, as best we can, you know. And I do a little group at the local jail. And, you know, a lot of what I try to do in the group is what I learned in the program that I was in. Because I don't have to come up with some brilliant, bright idea. If this is working, that's what I'm going to work. You know, and it's about me building a strong foundation, you know, and something that I can lay my hat on. You know, give me some values, some principles, something that I can stand on, and somewhere that I can work from. And it is important, man, because I'm unable to vote too. You know, and I feel like I should be throwing some tea somewhere. You know what I'm saying? They done took my money, done worked me for 18 cents an hour and everything. And I can't vote. I done paid all my fines and costs of court, and I can't vote. You know, I mean, I can't vote. I can't vote my conscience. You know, I mean, come on, man. I got to be real about it. I don't enjoy that. I don't like that, you know. And if I truly want to be free, I like what Eddie said, you know, I have to be willing to take input from my fellows, you know, and I truly want to be free. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Again, dial that number, send that email. We might have a whole nother tea party, I don't know. Jim Shea.
Good afternoon. My name is Jim Shea. I hope you all are as fired up as I am by listening to these very powerful statements that we're hearing here today. I'm an ex-felon. I've been an ex-felon for 35 years. You know, in Virginia, every felony conviction carries a life sentence, not necessarily a life behind bars, and I'm not talking about the endless discrimination and prejudice that ex-felons face in society, especially when it comes to making an honest living. I'm talking about the life sentence that is handed down to ex-felons by the Virginia Constitution that says no one shall be eligible to vote who has been convicted of a felony. Now, at the most recent tally, there were nearly 400,000 people in Virginia who have been disenfranchised by the Constitution of Virginia. And it won't surprise you to hear that in a state where 20% of the population are African Americans, African Americans constitute 55% of the disenfranchised population. This is the work of Jim Crow in the 21st century. It's time that we put an end to it. Now, there are people who will say, well, the Constitution provides a remedy for ex-felons. It says no one shall be eligible to vote who's been convicted of a felony unless their right has been restored by the governor. That sounds like a straightforward solution, doesn't it? Well, I'll tell you, if it were a real remedy, there wouldn't be 400,000 people disenfranchised. The process itself, as people here will attest, is very demanding, very complicated, and although some people do get their rights restored, I got my rights restored in 1989, I'll tell you that for many people, the process is so intimidating that they don't even make the attempt. And if you make the attempt and don't get everything exactly right, you can't, they'll turn you down, you can't reapply for 2 years. So in Charlottesville, as you heard from one of our earlier speakers, we have, under the sponsorship of the Virginia Organizing Project and Offender Aid and Restoration, we have put together a team of people under the leadership of Harold Folley, my good friend, who, and our attempt is to reach out to ex-felons, encourage them to apply, to get their rights restored, and to help them at every step along the way, because filling out the paper is just the first step. You've got to stick with it till you get it, till you make them give it back to you. So that's our goal, is to try to get more ex-felons' rights restored. But we also realize that this, although this may benefit the individuals who get their rights back, it leaves the basic, systemic, oppressive injustice in place. And so our ultimate goal is to get this law changed, to make the Constitution really protect the rights of the people of Virginia and not take them away. And failing that, we want to try to get the governor to do something to simplify the application process to the point that it's not any harder than going to DMV and renewing your automobile registration. That's the worst that it ought to be. So we know that it's an uphill climb, a steep uphill climb, to change Virginia's legal structures about this, but we're not going to be discouraged by that, because we will not accept the principle of liberty and justice for only some. That's right.
Thank you. Thank you, panelists. So as we reflect on Virginia, recognizing that here in Virginia we spend $1.25 billion on corrections, and we have 1 in 46 people in Virginia is under correctional control. In 1982, this figure was 1 in 108. So, and this is for everybody. I'm not even taking out just the black people. Okay? If we look at in the United States, for African Americans, it's 1 in 11. 1 in 9 for black men between 18 and 34. So we have a serious problem here. But I don't want to expound too much. I want to open it up for some discussion. Yes, there is a microphone back here. And are there any of the other panelists from the earlier panel here?
Yeah, a couple.
Great. If you would raise your hands. If you want to direct a question to one of them, feel free to do so as well.
I have two questions. One is for OAR. What is your recidivism ratio? You have that drug program in the courts. Do you know the recidivism ratio?
I work in the reentry program, which
Right.
we are a different department. That drug court is part of the OAR, but I don't know about that.
Okay. The second is, recently, the Prisons for Profit has just uncovered in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, there was two judges who were reimbursed by these prisons, and they kept incarcerating children under the age of 16 to go to these prisons for 10 years, 15 years for having marijuana and things like that. And I wondered what your response was to the difference between having public prisons and having for profit. Is this the same thing or the same kinds of issues in Virginia?
I can't speak to judicial corruption. I mean, that was an astonishing case, and it made the news, I think, as a result of that. What I can say is that, I'll give you an example. An outfit called Prison Health Services, which is a Tennessee corporation, services 5 Virginia prisons. Those prisons are the ones that have the largest infirmaries and also the mental hospital. The way the contract works between PHS, Prison Health Services, and the Department of Corrections is that there are estimated costs every year for every service provided. And if that cost should exceed 10%, with anything between 0 and 10% above the negotiated cost is shared between the Department of Corrections and PHS. Anything above that becomes the responsibility of PHS alone. So written into the contract are incentives, clearly, to stay within the negotiated rates, which for one woman at Fluvanna is, for total medical costs per year, is about $340. Right. I'm not aware of that situation in Virginia.
Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Reggie Washington. I work for ASG. Also as AIDS Service Group, Empowerment Project. Also as ex-felon. But I remember being in my cell one day and getting some information, and I read what Angela Davis had said, that the drug trade and the prison industry helps shape the economics of the United States of America. Now, looking at the economy today, and the recession and the stimulus package, I mean, can somebody touch on something about that?
We asked Ms. Davis.
Professor Davis?
Well, I tell you what, maybe I'll try to incorporate that into my remarks.
Thank you.
Professor Davis is speaking tonight at 7:30, Newcomb Hall Ballroom. Be there and get the answer.
Good evening. My name is Chauncey Banks. I'm also an ex-felon. I've been caught up in the criminal justice system maybe for the past 30 years. I entered criminal prison first when I was 16 years old. My question to the panel is, I never heard anybody really touch on violations. I know we talk about a lot of people going to prisons, but the biggest thing with me is the violations. Virginia is, I've spoken to a lot of people, which are inmates being incarcerated with guys from other states, and they're so amazed at the rate that us guys here in Virginia come back for violations. And it could be, like Mr. Howard said, as simple as you move from one resident to another. That could be reason for them to send you back to prison for 10, 15 years. Take my case, for instance. I have 8 years suspended time. For the simplest violation, I could receive that complete 8 years. And it just amazes me because that's what really gets me back and forth. It's not me committing new crimes. It's me not doing what, quote unquote, what my PO requires me to do. And I know it boils down to me doing what I'm supposed to do, but a lot of times it's hard to do a lot of the stuff that's piled on your plate. And I just wanted to, anybody on the panel who wants to address that question of technical violations, sending people back to prison for maybe not new crimes, just for violating old crimes.
Okay. Does anyone want to address that?
Respond briefly on that.
Go ahead.
You know, as I watch the system and work close with the system, and what I found out is that there's a systematic response to our action. And within that systematic response, they are held to a certain criteria. And the criteria is more systematic than it is individualized. And we have different circumstances, and I know, because I've been in and out the system, well, and the system kind of, at one point looked at it, well, this guy did this, this guy did this, this guy did this, so he's running the same story on me. One response. I believe that, you know, if the system take a good look at individuals and try to say, okay, how do I help this individual? You know, they help you get your paperwork straight. They tell you what dates you need to come in. You know you got to give your urine. But what about the other underlying issues that we as a black male have that a lot of people just don't see is going on in our lives? And we're trying to address the system while we're trying to address this wife or fiance over here with two of our kids that we really are trying to do the right thing with. And we got this underground job that we're not taking taxes out because we owe child support that have built up. Not only did the child support build up, but the interest on the child support is still building up. So we either got to pay that, or we take that $30, I'm not sure what it is now, down there and give that up. And so we kind of get caught in this systematic cycle that we really don't know what to do with. And I believe until they take a good look at how to change the system and say, how do I make this fit the criteria of these individuals? And they talk caseload, but I'm a firm believer that you know, intervention is the best answer.
Yeah. And if I could speak to that a little bit, because I see a lot of it. You know, you would wonder, you know, what is this little happy, snappy nonprofit director who grows vegetables and does programs? What is her connection to this? Part of the fabric of QCC's membership, we touch on the criminal justice system every day. In the last month, I've marched for gun violence. We've had a murder. You know, last year we had a murder at our garden. When we look at people offending, almost every week I write a letter to a judge or I intervene on behalf of somebody who's in the system. And when you have your largest employer, which is the University of Virginia, that won't hire felons, but when you are a felon, you have to have a job in order to not reoffend, you got a tough road to hoe. When you have child support that you have to pay, or you're going to go to prison for child support, but you can't get a job because you lost your driver's license when you went to prison last time and it's going to cost you $500 to get it back, you have a really tough road to hoe. So the system is sort of designed for failure, and that's why we see this really dramatic increase between 1982 being 1 in 108 people in the system. The people, we don't have that much more crime. As crime rates decrease, incarceration rates increase because people reoffend in very benign ways. You know, the sister was talking about violence. People are out here getting their heads beat in. It's that the system is beating their heads in. But that's just my 2 cents. Next question.
I guess touch on the last panel and this one in terms of thinking more broadly about what communities are affected by mass incarceration. I'm from Tappahannock, Virginia, so we got the alarming statistics earlier about rural areas. No one thinks about or at least like in the big picture, people don't talk about Tappahannock, Virginia being a place where, incarceration is ruining communities, and mass incarceration is ruining communities. And I don't want to substitute, or I am going to substitute anecdotal information for raw facts, just because I don't have all that raw information. But when you look at a town, you look at the town of Tappahannock, Virginia, and you look at the county, Essex County, which is in sort of the Tidewater region of Virginia, and you think about there are I think somewhere between 9,500 and 10,000 people in the entire county, and you had 25 black men arrested in one summer at one time with one sweep for drug offenses, and you had again maybe 2 weeks ago 15 more black men and white men and some black women arrested in one swoop. The effects, the brutal effects on rural communities are dramatic. And then when you link that with the fact that there aren't jobs, you have to go perhaps 2 hours, perhaps 1 hour. A lot of people commute to D.C., which is a full 2 hours, 15 minutes without traffic. When you think about the fact that there aren't jobs, there were factories when I was growing up, and there's one now. There were 5. There's one. When you think about Walmart being the best employer possible, when you think about all of those, how all of that feeds into how all of that feeds into mass incarceration, and when you think about the fact that the police really don't have any sort of they really just don't care. They will look, oh, black, let's get them. Like I've been, and this is not to say that I'm according no high honor to graduating from the University of Virginia, but I graduated from the University of Virginia, and last summer was pulled from my car at gunpoint by the police in my area. It's not, they don't care. The degree didn't make one bit of difference. And I know I'm going on and on with this sort of anecdotal information, but I think that it's important to recast how we think about mass incarceration. It may not be that really large numbers of people from Charlottesville or from Essex or Tappahannock, Virginia, or Westmoreland County, Virginia, are being locked up the same way that a large number of people from, say, New York are being locked up, but a large percentage of folks are being locked up, and a large percentage of black folks in black communities are being locked up. And so I just wanted to say that we need to think beyond New York and California and think about how this is a truly wide picture that touches from coast to coast.
Thank you, JT.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ruthie Gilmore. Thank you, everyone on the panel, for, I don't know, you made me feel really strong. I wanted to just make a few comments following on JT's comment, and that is, these are stories too, but I can prove them because I have a degree in social science. Not so long ago, I was doing work in rural California in the communities where prisons are built and where prisoners are sent. Because it occurred to me and the people I was working with that if we stop them from building it, they can't fill it. And they had tried to build prisons in urban communities, and they had failed because of all kinds of reasons. But the main is that in urban communities, there are more likely to be people who are able to organize and who can. And there are more likely to be many, many different employers, which means that people who are organizing are not at risk of losing their jobs and losing their homes. In rural communities, it's less likely the case that people can get a job somewhere else if the employer that they work for doesn't like that they're organizing against a prison. In rural California, so I understand, JT, you don't want to hear about California. This is rural California. Rural California, like in rural North Carolina and rural Texas and other places, a lot of the people who get jobs in the prisons are people of color too. And the famous case in Tulia, Texas, where 45 people, literally 10% of the black population of this town, was all caught up in a drug sweep and sent to prison and finally all been released because the whole thing was fabricated by the cop who arrested them. A lot of their family members who were caring for their children while they were in prison worked in the prison. And these were all people of color. I'm actually getting to my point. I want one more example, and then I'll make my point. The third one is California has the highest rate of sending people back to prison for technical violations of any state in the country. So it's about 35, 40, sometimes 50% in most places in the country. 7 out of 10 people in California get sent back to prison on a technical violation. And when I was talking to some of the children in rural California about what kinds of things they're worried about, they said they mostly are children of agricultural workers, and they said, we're worried about pesticides, we're worried about air pollution, and we're worried about the police. Because they are, as JT said, being policed as intensively, because they're poor people, as people in the urban areas. So where I'm going is this. Perhaps as we're thinking about the system and what to do about it, we've got to think about taking the most extreme possible position for what we want, even if we might be willing to settle for less. So for example, on voting. My position would be that everyone gets to vote regardless. So I don't mean you get to vote when you get out. I mean when you're inside you vote, because you're still living in the United States of America. I actually think children should vote, because they get screwed over all the time too. And they've got a lot of reason to throw tea around. And finally, I want to coming back to this question about the number of people who have technical violations in California, I would like to caution us against thinking that the economics of the prison system is solely run by the interests of private prison developers. In California, the biggest prison system in the United States, the prisons are public. They're publicly owned, they're publicly operated. But the people who violate, the people who send them back, have a money in their pocket interest to keep the prisons full. So if tomorrow all the prisons were made miraculously publicly owned and operated, I'm not altogether sure that we'd see one more brother or one more sister out on the street. Thank you.
Just as a comment.
Yes, go ahead.
On that, one of the benefits to rural communities when they invite a prison to come to take root is that they then get to count the population of the prison as part of the population of their county, and hence make themselves eligible for state and federal money. So while they can't vote, they certainly are enhancing the community that welcomes them.
And it employs a lot of people.
Yeah, and it employs a lot of people.
When they opened up Walden Ridge, and I forgot who the governor was at the time, and Gilmore, and he Christian Walden Ridge. As Virginia's, this was on TV.
Yeah.
As the Virginia New Bread and Breakfast.
That's right. That's right.
So that's your prison system in the state of Virginia.
Yeah, that's it.
Christian. Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi. Thanks so much for speaking. You guys are great. My name's Jen Feigert, and I've interned at the Virginia Organizing Project and at ASG. So I've heard these stories before from not just the panelists, but from other people working at these organizations about going to prison and coming out. And you guys are huge success stories. I mean, you're sitting up here telling us your story, getting word out, working and fighting to change things and make them better. And my question for you is, what makes your story different? Like, what about your experience, either if it was in prison or out of prison, like how did you somehow manage to do what so many people haven't been able to? Is it like someone in your life that just said something that made you decide that you were going to, look for VOP, or, you know what I mean? Like, what is it that average Joe coming out of prison can do or do in prison to give themselves the best chance they can, as the rest of us are trying so hard to change the fundamental problems?
Let me just speak for myself. I chose, this was a choice I made, to get into using, selling drugs because of a phony status title that came with being a street drug dealer. I was attracted to it with all the movies and the Superfly, all this stuff. It attracted me. But basically, I was lazy, irresponsible. And this seemed like it fit right into what I need to do. I could sleep all day, be up all night. I could drive nice cars, nice clothes, and I really have to do no work, but I don't like to work. That's the truth. It wasn't nothing about my upbringing, or I had to settle for less than, and none of that stuff, or I wanted to be like this person. I thought it was an easy way to escape work and provide for my family. Little did I know when I made that decision that I would be my best customer. I did not. See, that wasn't in the book. I didn't read the book to you. I just read it to where it fit me. Had I played the tape all the way through, it was done before me, so it's been done over and over and over. Why did I choose to do that? And I got sick and tired of going to penitentiary. The last time I went was a blessing straight from God. That's why I'm not mad with penitentiary. It's what you do with that time in the penitentiary we're going to turn what you're going to do when you get out. You can feed into all the BS that go on in penitentiary, and you will live there. And in a lot of cases, they dying there now. All type of stuff going on. I got to deal with people out here, the individual inmate, and help him change his life. Why do you keep choosing to violate? That's a choice you make. There's nobody making you violate. You got to work. You can't drink a drug, because when you drink a drug, you act out and you cause chaos and confusion and you commit crime. Period. That's what you do. I'm not mad with the criminal justice. It's just some people in some institutions that want to hoard people and make a living by what we do. But what choice do we make? We've been together 40 years, all three of us together, shooting dope, selling dope, and committing crime. That's the choice we made. We paid our price for it. How much do we have to pay? So, when I get out, the only thing that would keep me straight was hanging around people that were doing the right thing. I could always go back to where I came from, where they're still doing the same thing. I chose not to do it. I can get up right now and go back. Ain't nothing going to stop me. A piece of paper from the Department of Correctional Appeal Office don't stop me from using drugs. Never have. I know how to beat the test. I can't beat the drug addiction. That's what I can't. I don't know how to do it. So I stopped doing it. So I rely on people like some of y'all that's been where I've been and don't want to go, and I do something different. I basically don't know what the hell I may do today, but I know I can't use no matter what, because I'm going to penitentiary, because I commit crimes when I get high, because my mind gone, and I'm subject to do any damn thing. I got plenty of experience there. You read the rap sheet, you can see it. I ain't got caught for every crime I committed. I've been in penitentiary the rest of my life. But God intervened again. So I can do something different. But I can always go back anytime I get ready.
But let me...
Can I elaborate on that?
Yeah, go ahead, Eddie.
My road to redemption started when somebody seen something in me that I didn't see in myself. And in seeing that, they began to show me how to believe in myself. I believed in what I did when I was out there in the street. I was a drug addict. I was a good drug addict. I didn't halfway get high. I got high. So, but that was one of the principles that keep me on the straight and narrow now, because I want to be the best at what I do now. And I want to do the right things. And when somebody showed me that, and I was able to grasp that, and I was able to lay hold to that, and again, it wasn't a system. It wasn't parole and probation. It wasn't OAR. It wasn't the fear of going back to the penitentiary. You know, going to jail didn't scare me. Going to jail was salvation. But right at the point of death, going to jail was... But holding on to what I was given. And Herb repeated it again. I had to go back to the foundation. And my foundation was the guys I hung out with when I was out there. And we would give it to one another. And we would encourage one another. And that's a piece that I really believe if us as a society can get and begin to meet us, ex-felons, where we're at, and use that, you'll see a greater success rate.
I'd like to comment on that, Karen, if that's okay. For me, it was changing my belief system, what I believed about myself, that because I was a felon, I would always have to be a felon and therefore make choices as a felon make. But I had to change my belief system that not to let my past dictate what my future would be. And out of that, I had to go back and find out who I was created to be, which is a woman who is positive, empowered, with all of the positive attributes, and therefore make decisions based out of that belief, and which decisions and belief and choices which have been positive. And it's taken a process and hard work, commitment and dedication, determination. But if I can do it, anybody can do it.
Go ahead, Harold.
Well, my thing was when I was incarcerated for a while, I was really wild. But this older guy caught me and said, hey, come here, let me teach you some things. And one thing he taught me was stop blaming everybody else for what you're doing. You got to blame yourself first, then you got to move on. The second thing that really changed me is my family. Because when you're incarcerated, your family's incarcerated. Everybody around you are incarcerated. So that really changed me a lot, to the point of when I got out, I said, I'm not going to go back. I said, I'm going to not try to go back. And I didn't. And when I got out, I got support from Ducey, from Eddie. I got support from them, but also, I run an after-school program, and those kids in there give me encouragement to keep going on, to keep doing what I got to do, because I know if I can change one of those kids' ideas about being in prison or going to jail, I did a whole lot that one day.
Yes, sir.
How y'all doing?
All right.
All right.
Living.
I'm very pleased to be here and to see everybody here, especially Angela Davis. My name is Thomas Cox. I'm out here now, just did 26 years. I've been home for a year and a half. I wanted to speak, thank you. I wanted to speak about Wallace Ridge and Red Onion. I was one of the first prisoners that was sent to Mecklenburg. Mecklenburg was the beginning of this whole thing. Mecklenburg was the first control unit that the Virginia system had. It's supposed to have been for the worst of the worst. When we got to Mecklenburg, they treated us like animals. They chained us to the bed for 7 and 8 days straight, and we defecated on ourselves. We ate bread and water sometimes. We ate one meal on the third day, and we went through a lot of changes. And then they sent the Briley brothers. The Briley brothers, they killed a lot of people in the Richmond area. They sent them up there on death row. And the Briley brothers escaped from death row. Myself, I wasn't in the building at the time, but I was the spokesman for 8 hostages that was taken. And right after that, I was shipped out of state to the state of New Mexico. Now, I first have to say that when I first came to the penitentiary in the 70s, I was what you call a boogeyman, because you had people that, and I know some people on the panel know, they was called booty bandits that was raping people. I got 2 murder charges between 72 and 73. All of this was accumulation of me beginning to read, listening to people that had some sense, reading books about Malcolm, George Jackson, and different people that put some things in my head that gave me some understanding about this system, and that the prison system was another form of a plantation when the 13th Amendment says that there would not be any slavery in this country again except those who are duly convicted of a crime. And I understand that they did not come down on me until we started standing up and fighting back from all of the brutality that we went through. The years that I spent in New Mexico, I read, I took up law, I got connected with some beautiful, beautiful people. I went to Connecticut, I stayed in Connecticut for 13 years. I was shipped back to the state penitentiary, and I was released on May the 1st in 2007. Since I've been out here, I've been speaking at universities, I've been speaking at colleges, and I've been doing everything that I can to work with the youth and try to get them to understand that there's another side of this story and that we need to save our children and to keep them from going through all of this stuff that is going on right now. And last, I want to say some beautiful people on the panel. I didn't hear everything that was said, but I'm glad that I came here. I'm glad that I caught the things that was said, and it gives me a good feeling to know that there's somebody else out here that is trying to do something. And I will continue to rise and do what I'm doing, and I will not stop. And I give thanks to everybody that's concerned about these issues and will stand up and do the right things.
Hi, my name is Carl Hicks, and I work for Region 10 Community Service. And I guess my home is in Sussex County, Waverly, Virginia, where they built the last two prisons, Sussex 1 and Sussex 2. But it's kind of, my message is hope. You know, I too am an ex-felon. I started my criminal career in 1972, and I know all those guys you're talking about. Earl Clanton was my cousin who broke out with those Bliley boys in Mecklenburg. But I remember I come from a upper middle class family who, good parents, worked hard, honest, and I'm the youngest of five who the rest of my siblings are educated, went to college, and that was my plan. But I didn't complete. Instead, I chose a life of drugs, and it brings a lot of other things. And I began engaging in the law in '72. And coming in the background with the family I had, my father, who was locally politically involved, he got me a pardon. Back in, I can't think when, I think it was Governor Dalton, who is Tim McCain's father-in-law. And the reason I'm standing here is because the message I'm trying to send out is the message of hope. Because today I struggle with that message, because you have to continue on living in order to get ahead. And during that process, I didn't change. I didn't grow up. I was a grown man, but still acting adolescent. And it was at a point where my father, who locally, politically involved, was going to get me a full pardon. I was one that would have been fortunate to have all of that, but making bad decisions, I wound up in prison for 3 years, which all of that just voided. And you know, and while I was in there, I remember I learned a lot. I saw a lot. I made a lot of healthy decisions that this is not what I wanted to be like. I didn't want to die this way. I like to say I grew up. But just close to my release, there was an attorney, Oliver Hill, who was part of the lawyers on Brown versus Board of Education, Mr. Hill. He came through and did a seminar, a speech. And one of the guys asked him, said, you know, with everything from segregation, integration, with the work that Dr. King has done, at this point, and this was in 1995, are we retrogressing or progressing? And he felt in his heart that we were kind of retrogressing, and I could understand, because it was so much idle time. I saw so many men waste time in prison.
Yeah. Thank you, because we're running low. We need to wrap up.
That didn't do nothing. So my point is, You know, I came to this town. This town has been really warm and welcome and open their arms to me. And they didn't see me in my using days because I have 16 years of clean time. But the thing is, my message is I was going to ask someone on the panel to speak about the hope part, because it's very, very difficult as a convicted felon finding the desire and the energy of wanting to do this because of the rejection that we get from our legal system and from society itself. And I just wanted to send that message and maybe have someone who can speak on that, because that is what we have to have, desire and hope, because it's a slow process and it's a
Thank you. But if you will indulge me just a moment as a facilitator, because I'm going to get real cynical right now. I am not hopeful. And I'm going to speak for myself. I can get down with all this personal responsibility and people making bad choices, but we also have to recognize that we have a system that is at work here. So I'm going to ask you all to indulge me for a moment. I'm going to ask every African American man in here who has been convicted of a crime, I don't care if it's child support, I don't care what it is. If you have been convicted of a crime, been through the criminal justice system, please stand up. If you have been arrested, stand up, please. Now, I believe that is an overwhelming majority of the African American men in this room. Am I correct?
Yes, you are.
If you are a white man and you have been arrested or convicted of a crime, please stand. I made my point. Thank you very much.
Don't point.
We need to recognize... Pardon? Okay, women. All right, let's do the girls. Let's be fair. Let's get the gender thing right. Okay, ladies, African American, if you have been arrested, please stand up. I got to sit down, but I'm going to get arrested one day. Okay.
Come on, Karen.
Would our Caucasian ladies please stand if you have been arrested?
2, 3, well, that's...
Again, oh, go girl!
We're getting somewhere.
All right.
Can I say something?
Yes, you may.
About the hope and non-hope part?
We do need hope, but I just want to make a point that we have a bad system. Go ahead.
Well, I'm on your side with that one. But where my hope lies is in the fact that the more we talk about it, the more African American men and women will realize they can make it if they want to make it. Now, you know, there is a system out here. And we all know that we are the biggest target of that system. We know this. Now, you said you'll get arrested, and that's what made me respond to this. No, you won't. Let me tell you why. When I first came home from the penitentiary, she was not. When I first came home from the penitentiary, it looked like I was pulled over twice a week, at least. But once we start moving in the circles of the system, you get pulled over a couple times, they go to their radio, they come back, well, Mr. Howard, have a nice day. Because the system say if you's a who's who of society, don't mess with them. Something wrong with that system. How we get arrested should not reflect on who we are in society. How we get arrested and convicted should reflect on the crime that we commit.
Right.
That's where I lose hope. Because we are still the target of a Jim Crow system in a modern day era. It's just that simple. And prison have become the new slavery, and the pen have become the new whip. It's just that simple.
Can I pose a question to the panel? What do you think needs to change within our way of dealing with crime and justice?
So, the first, all right. How do I count the ways? first and foremost, since black people and white people commit drug crimes at the same rates, we ought to start arresting white people in the same proportions we do black people. Then we'd get a change in the law. The second is what, as Mr. Stoller, is that your name? The blue shirt back there? Simon, all right, said, you know, so I spend a lot of time talking to murderers. I have lately because of one lawsuit. And we are spooked as a society by our crime shows. You know, from murderer to murderer, there's all kinds of ways and reasons that people commit murder. And the vast majority of them are episodic crimes that are committed against people that you know and that will never arise again in your life or at any other time. So I really applaud your statement about trying to demystify what criminal law is and also the true character of the crimes that people commit. So those would be the two things I do. Arrest all the white people for drug crimes and really get to know your neighborhood murderer.
Oh, Dylan? Oh, where did there you go.
This question is for the professor from California. I'd like to know what the incentives are for the public prison system for keeping people incarcerated. Is it more than the leasing of the prisoners for work to corporations? Is it because they want to retain a population so the staff can have jobs? What are the incentives in a public prison system for incarcerating people, given the high cost of keeping people in prison?
Thanks, Emerald. Yes.
Good question. Mostly the incentive for a public prison system to keep people in prison is for all of the people who depend on their paychecks from that system to continue getting their paychecks. That's number one. The most well-organized and most powerful union in the state of California is the Prison Guards Union. And that's the prison guards and the parole officers are a single union. They are one union. They don't organize anybody else. They have one employer. They're very focused. They're kind of like the National Rifle Association that Lisa Miller was talking about earlier today, right? And they usually get what they want. And one of the things that they do, in fact, is they run candidates for political office in the counties where the prisons are located, particularly the political office of district attorney, so that they can be confident that if something happens inside the prison and the case is referred out to court, that they're going to get the heaviest possible charges and convictions, which also helps to keep the prisons full. So that's number one. There are also lobbyists who sell to the prison system all kinds of things, and they are very interested in continuing to sell those things. Now, the lobbyists and the investment bankers who raise the capital for the prisons to be built would make the same amount of money if they sold those things to schools or hospitals or highways. The only people who have a specialized interest in prison are people who make a living looking after people who are living in cages. Everybody else can do something else. A teacher can teach anybody if they have the right training. And the doctors can provide medical care to anybody. And the locksmiths and so on and so forth. So the only people who have the specialized interest in the public system are the guards, and they're extremely well organized.
Thank you. Okay, one last question, Dylan. Okay, two last questions. Come on, you guys.
My name is Dylan Rosenthal. I know this is a roundtable on prison and its aftermath, but I just want to talk briefly about what happens before prison. I've heard that prisons can estimate their future capacity needs by looking at the risk factors of grade school kids all the way as early as third grade. And we've got school discipline policies that mirror our criminal justice policies that rely on punishment and exclusion. There's so much research that kids of color get harsher penalties for lesser offenses. If you look at the offenses, disorderly conduct, disrespect, assault, not causing bodily harm, this is what kids get kicked out of school for. They get suspended. They come back to school angry at the staff. They're less connected. They have unresolved conflicts. It's never dealt with. They act out again. They get suspended again. expelled. Eventually they drop out, and then they wind up on the street, and then they end up in the criminal justice system.
Thank you. And one more alarming statistic piggybacking on that. In Charlottesville, if you're 25 years old and you're an African-American man, 80% of you have a high school education or less. 40% have less than a high school education. Dr. McDowell?
No, I just simply want to applaud the last comment. We tried to make this point in the last session, and there are things that we can do here. I think it's both important to delineate what everyone is delineating, to be angry, to rage, but then we have to take some action. And here, the suspension rates for grade school kids, middle school kids, high school kids have a disproportionate impact on African American youth. And indeed, these are criminalizing tendencies. They have literally something that amounts to a book of charges against people, which begin in grade school and escalate in middle school. And by high school, the children are so disaffected, or the students are so disaffected that they're out of there. And that's part of the design. They are referred to as social outcasts. People will say to you in one breath that they believe in the importance of education, but you cannot believe in the importance of education if you are constantly removing students from the orbit of instruction. And we need to hold the public schools in Charlottesville they are indeed suspending students and expelling students at alarming rates. And before they do that, they warehouse them in something called the alternative school. We should ask publicly, alternative to what? The law says every pupil has the right to a free, appropriate public education. We need to hold the public schools in Charlottesville accountable for disparities that have long existed. Since Virginia closed its schools after the Brown v. Board, you can get anyone whose history goes back here who will tell you that everybody understands that the public schools in Charlottesville entered into a devil's bargain with the state of the Board of Education in Virginia, and that in exchange for keeping their children, the children of the privileged, in the public schools, they would in effect have two separate school systems, which we continue to have. The students go, they enter the same door, but once they are in that door, they are not receiving the same education when they are allowed to enter the door at all. So the person who is talking about education is absolutely fundamental. We're talking about what happens after people are incarcerated. But we are living daily with a system that is basically conditioning youth to incarceration. And this is not an exaggerated claim here. I think this can be well documented, and it is within our power to do something about it. And while we're waiting for something to be done, to keep sounding the alarm.
That's right.
Wherever we are.
But also, as long as we can keep the father out of the house, we can keep our children angry. If we keep them angry, we can keep them suspended from school. Right. So the prison effect don't just affect us. I believe it was Harold was talking about his family. We got angry kids. I worked with a youth group, and I worked with boys 5th through 8th grade, and we had angry boys. And my belief and my faith said, be a father to them. And I did it for years. And then it was like, okay, now go minister to the fathers so they'll know how to accept their kids. And you make that connection. Prison do affect our school and our kids that's in them schools. Make no mistake about this.
Thank you, Brother Howard. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Namri Bagayoko. I'm actually a resident in orthopedic surgery here at UVA. And I'm here because this is definitely, when a lot of the black males are going to prison, it definitely creates a pipeline problem where there's, they're not going into other things, definitely not going to medical school, because once you have a felony, that goes in your application, that makes it impossible to get in. But statements, the question I had also is I need to get your information, the gentleman at the end, because when I was discussing with my barber, during the presidential election, I found that he's currently disenfranchised and can't vote. And then also, lady in the middle, I forgot your name, unfortunately, but I'm gonna have to disagree with one of the terms you used when you were talking about the black prison guards being racist to the white women in prison. You used reverse racism, but the definition to me of racism is discrimination against someone based on their race. So they should just be racist and not necessarily reverse
you're right.
racist.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's
I'm sorry.
basically all I want to say.
I agree.
Thanks.
Thank you, Doctor. Yes, there is a reception immediately following this roundtable. At the Quality Community Council, the organization of which I'm the executive director, we believe that our world-class city is no better than its worst neighborhood. And we also believe that it takes courage to make a difference. Right. Can you please join me in applauding the courage of these panelists? And thanking Dr. McDowell. There's a reception outside, and please be here at 7:30 Newcomb Hall.